Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans from across the country and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. Basically, as my buddy Boston, you know him as Austin Ward, and I record this podcast. It's a couple of days before National Signing Day, but we're going to, which is pretty funny because really Ohio State's only signing one person on signing day, right? Right, Boston?
Yeah, it's as you said the last couple of weeks on this show, the real signing day was in December.
Yeah, but the bottom line, as the old saying goes, this class, the book on this class has all but been written as far as like who's coming in, the preface.
Yep.
And it's going to be interesting as Boston, you know him as Austin, and I kind of shuffle through several of these fellas and who we think might make an immediate impact and who they might be waiting on. But what really stands out about this class, which, like I said, is going to be topped by, one of its higher ranked components in Cameron Martinez, the do everything player from Muskegon, Michigan, who was probably a better offensive player in high school, but is probably going to be used on the defensive side in the secondary. Maybe, he might actually turn that hybrid back into that hybrid position into a real thing.
Right.
As his career goes on. We'll see how it goes. But the bottom line is what you ought to put next to him is Cameron Martinez, football player, because that's what he is, right?
Yeah, and I actually had a couple people last week when Berm wrote the story and we were breaking it down, and I wrote about what position he was most needed at. And it was crazy to me. I know that sometimes it's just a minority reaction, but this guy, people were like, oh, he's not even in the top 300. Like, why is this such a big deal? He's not going to help for a while. And it's like, when Ryan Day found this guy, he absolutely fell in love with his personality, his intelligence, and then not to mention incredible athleticism that can do whatever. I mean, this is a guy who, as I said last week on your show, his coach told me he would have been the best defensive player on their team, but they needed him to play quarterback last year and then had 9 minutes of just touchdowns on the highlight reel and took him to the brink of a state championship. He can play. Yeah. He can play. He can't play on the offensive line, obviously, and you probably don't want to put him on the defensive line, but I think you could put him anywhere else on the field, running back, if he wanted to stay at quarterback. Northwestern basically offered him an opportunity to do that if he really wanted to. Safety, corner, linebacker, depending on how he develops. I mean, this guy is incredibly valuable, and you know as well as anybody, Tim, that when you look at what Ohio State has prized on the recruiting trail the last couple of years, it's positional versatility. And this guy has it more than anyone else that you could have in this class. So, people got to him a little bit late, and sometimes recruiting analysts aren't in a big hurry to admit they might have missed the boat or they were late to the party. He's still a 4-star athlete, and he's a 2-time Mr. Michigan football. I don't know how many times that's been done, but it's pretty rare, and that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If we were voting on each of those measures you just proposed, I would say yay, as in or A, as in I agree with everything you just said.
Motion passes.
And the bottom line is we all know about high school coaches. You're coaching your team. You're not coaching players based on what they're going to be doing 3 years from now in college. I mean, you're trying to win games for your team. And that's where a lot of people get lost, I think, in the shuffle, in the whatever you want to call it, the analysis aspect of things, because everything is so specialized anymore these days. But there are still these great standout players like Darren Lee did for New Albany way back when.
Oh, yeah.
Or Joshua Perry did, who I had on my show last week. Joshua Perry did way back when for his high school, Olentangy. I mean, there are guys who can uplift the whole team by just playing them everywhere and sicking them on people like they did with Sam Hubbard down in Cincinnati. What was that? Moeller way back when. So don't judge the book by its high school cover. Judge it by kind of what Ohio State projects. And there's no doubt about it when Kerry Combs got back in the swing of things and made his visit to Muskegon. He made an impact, but also this kid made an impact on him. And so you can see where this is going.
And I don't think it's it's no mystery. When we were talking about the wait for Kerry Combs to be announced as the defensive coordinator. You know, Ohio State wanted him. I mean, a Super Bowl would have been a great recruiting tool if he could go out and show that ring, but it would have taken longer for Cam Martinez, and so there was certainly part of Ohio State wishing that Combs and the Titans would, come up short because they wanted him to go to Muskegon and see Cam Martinez. Like, that was a huge deal, and it was 2 days after the announcement, that Monday afternoon. He needed Tuesday to, get certified, and then Wednesday he's in Michigan. I mean, it's no coincidence that that's how that played out.
Yeah, I don't know if he jumped on his couch. I don't know if he jumped up on his couch or not, but that'll be part of folklore down the road, like it was with Sean Wade and his family. But I digress. Well, let's get right to it, Austin. Boston Ward. I mean, I'll tell you who I expect. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum pretty much about the 4 wide receivers they got in this class that are just outstanding, and not the least of whom is Julian Fleming and, G. Scott right on down the road there. But, I'm just curious on who you think might rise and become like maybe a surprising impact player of the next couple of seasons. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are guys that just catch my eye right out of the bat. I mean, Legend Cavazos, who was part of the class and backed out and then re-stepped in. I mean, I think that guy's got a big upside. I mean, that's like saying the sun is hot, But I mean, that's for example, a guy that just jumps out at me that could make an immediate impact. Who's somebody on your brain that you think could be right there? We know both of these quarterbacks they brought in, C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller. One of them is going to be at least third string next year. So we all know how things kind of go in the quarterback category. Sometimes third string could be first string, and a couple of calamity situations. But past those two guys, who do you think could really step up in the next 6 months?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the quarterbacks, because to me, I don't think there's anything that's more fascinating. You wrote about this 2 weeks ago than C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller coming in and trying to compete right now, because I don't look at it as just, hey, third string. And I know you said that was at a minimum, but they both arrive in January, so they're going to have 8 months, 9 months to fully acclimate and learn the offense. And both of them are, if you're going off the recruiting rankings, both of them are more touted quarterbacks than Gunnar Hoke was when he came out. And Gunnar Hoke, there's no other way to say it. He struggled last year. We all had the expectation when he transferred from Kentucky that he would be the backup quarterback, and he couldn't beat out Chris Chuganoff. Now, part of that is, maybe you give Chug the nod because of the experience. He knew the playbook and this, that, and the other. But none of us who had ever seen Chuganoff before really thought. I guess maybe you were higher on him than I was, but I didn't think there was any way that Gunnar Hoke didn't come in and be the backup. So what does that mean for spring ball? Well, C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller have a legitimate shot to actually be the backup quarterback for this team. And then if you're that, well, you're right in line there to replace Justin Fields when he moves on. So I really am interested in those quarterbacks because, if something happens, if that, another knee, we saw what happened at the end of the Penn State game, those guys could be on the field and really important for Ohio State in a hurry. So I think they're more important than many really understand at this point because of the impact they could have. I know that wasn't really the direction that you maybe wanted me to go to kick it off, but the next couple months with those guys are really, really important.
Yeah, I agree 155%, and that's about as much as you can agree. I mean, it's hyperbole when you think about it. But another guy that we've talked about a little bit is that I'm really high on from the standpoint of watching his video and then knowing where he played is Court Williams.
Oh yeah,
the kid from Bosco Prep out there, St. John Bosco Prep out there in Bellflower, California, same school I think that produced Wyatt Davis. But I mean, he just kind of exudes a guy who, like we were talking about a while ago by Cameron Martinez, is a football player, man. I mean, he gets after it. I mean, he's quick. It reminds me a little bit of the video I watched of Justin Hilliard way back when. It would just, there'd all of a sudden be a flash onto the screen, and it's Justin Hilliard like lightning, arriving at the point of attack. And I don't know if you agree with me on him or not, but I mean, do you think he has the possibility of seeing the field?
I loved getting to know Court Williams when Berm and I went out with Will in November to do some Bermanologies, and we'd talk to C.J. Stroud and Clark Phillips at that time.
Yeah.
But we watched Court Williams and St. John Bosco play that Friday night, and he only needed, it was the second defensive snap of the game. Court Williams comes, so blitzes looks like Sean Wade, coming off that famed play. But,
Yeah.
Obviously it didn't end in a targeting, but he makes a sack on the second play of the game. And I just kind of look over at Berm, and I'm like, wow, because this kid is on a different level. And it wasn't the greatest opposition that they're going to play, but that's some good football there in Southern California. And I also was impressed just walking around the afternoon we spent there, the facilities they have. That's a real powerhouse high school program, and you've seen this now with St. Thomas Aquinas in Florida and Lake Travis in Austin. Like, Ohio State is really attracted to these programs. Obviously have good players, but they also get them ready for the competition and ready for the transition to college. And so Court Williams, I think, was ready to make that leap when he came in last month. He was expecting everything that was going to be thrown at him, from the workouts to with Mickey Murati to go into class. He's a bright guy. I really enjoyed getting to know him, and I would have brought him up more in that first part, but I don't know that linebacker, and maybe if that bullet transpires the way we thought it did last year, he could jump in there. Linebacker is a really loaded group, and the other name you mentioned there, Justin Hilliard, I mean, right now they're trying to find a way to keep him on the field at Ohio State this spring, because there are so many guys coming back. You're only losing Malik Harrison, and you got Baron Browning, Pete Warner, and Tuff Borland, all with experience. You got Taraja Mitchell just chomping at the bit to get on the field. Kayvon Pope, we heard all about him in training camp with the interceptions and made a couple in the season. Dallas Gant, he's had a couple of years to develop and could be in that outside role as well. He's an athlete who's made a couple big-time plays on special teams. So, Court Williams, I think, is going to have an opportunity to wait and develop, and that'll be good for him. But if you're talking about somebody I see having an impact 2-3 years down the road, I would absolutely put Court Williams near the top of the list for this class.
I want to tell you something. A fellow that I've become enamored of in the last month or so, because this guy was sort of a late bloomer, I think, in a lot of people's eyes, or at least in the recruiting experts' eyes. But and then I'm thinking about his brother and the progress he made at Ohio State. You know where I'm going with this? Is Ty Hamilton, kid from Pickerington Central. I mean, he's a different look from his brother. From a size standpoint. 6'3", 250. Listen, a defensive end. He might grow into a defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. But you turn on the like I say, I like to watch video, because video kind of, and you have to keep in mind the video and who they're going against. And rate the competition. But as they got into the state playoffs and stuff, this guy, he played on another level, and that's against better competition. That's what I was talking about Court Williams. I mean, they played upper level competition. Cavazos, that's the same way with him. And I'm just looking at Ty Hamilton. I think he could be I don't know if diamond in the rough is the right term, more like a diamond that just needs a little bit of polish. What's your take on him?
I was, last week, Berm had a day off. He needed a little bit of help for writing his dotting the I's recruiting notebook. And I said, anything you need, I'll help out. I can't give anywhere near the insight that he can. I wasn't even going to try. So I looked at what the makeup of the 2021 roster would be to see where the recruiting needs were going to be for Ohio State. This is a long-winded way of saying that there is a big-time need for guys at defensive tackle. And Ty Hamilton might project a little bit more, or right now would be a defensive end. But I think both he and Darion Henry might find a clearer path to playing time and have a more impactful start to their careers if they embrace that 3-tech move, which Larry Johnson, when he talks about his defensive line in the Rushman and where you can have really a big-time impact that people don't think, is if you have pass rushing skills and you can move inside and get one-on-one matchups against guards. Well, look what Draymond Jones did. He built an entire career out of that a couple years ago and got drafted and is making money in the NFL level. And we've seen that time after time Adolphus Washington having success inside in that 3-tech position. The guys who did that last year. I think that it's really a spot where if you can't really be a Chase Young, Tyreek Smith defensive end, take a look. Jaxon Cornell came around to that thinking last year, and he's probably going to turn that into an NFL career. There's a lot of money to be made, some stacks to be made that you wouldn't think, and chances to get in the backfield with really advantageous matchups. So I would say, with everything they lost with Landers, Ty's big brother Devon, and Jaxon Cornell, and then what you're looking at next year with Haskell Garrett's going to be gone. I think there's a really good chance if Tommy Togiai has the season that I project for him, he could move on to the NFL level. Antoine Jackson will be gone. Their defensive tackles, 3-tech or nose, Ohio State has got to get some production there from new guys. And I would say, the sooner that they can maybe get to that point, whether it's Darion Henry or Ty Hamilton maybe embracing a 3-tech, the better off they'll be, because those guys might have a clear path to really helping Ohio State in a hurry.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's like the Jacoby Cowan kid from Charlotte. There's another guy that played against pretty good competition, and there, you never, like I said, you never know how they're going to pan out, but he's highly rated, right, compared to some of the other guys, even in the Ohio State class. And I like, like you're pointing out, sometimes it's opportunity, coupling with timing, and the bottom line is there is some opportunity for some guys to make maybe some immediate impact in the 2 deep or at least a 3 deep roster there. And we know Larry Johnson's not averse to playing 3 guys at every position on that defensive front, at least early in the season, just to see what's up, So I'm as curious as you are to see how those guys develop. The thing is, I wanted to touch on with you, when we were talking with Mickey Marotti a week ago, a great opportunity there to speak with him about things. But he made an interesting, curious comment about the weight training program that, especially players from Texas enjoy. And then he threw in Ohio there at the end because I don't think he wanted to offend Ohio people. Yeah. But it is interesting. It is interesting that he brought that up the way he did, didn't it? I mean, and you look at like Jaxon Smith-Njibga, one of the great 4 receivers in this recruiting class, is benefited from that. He's from Rockwall, Texas. And by the way, but from Truth in broadcasting, I'm sitting in Texas, in Lufkin, Texas right now, because I had to come back down here. My mom is dealing with another challenge, and so I'm coming live from Texas, so to speak. But it is curious how he brought that up with some of these players coming in who just are sort of ahead of the game in terms of what it takes in the weight training.
I think that's, that goes into it as well with what we were talking about with, Court Williams and Wyatt Davis before him at St. John Bosco, or, when the Bosas came from St. Thomas Aquinas, or these kids that go to the IMG Academy and have the fancy weight training and, some nutrition programs to help them get started. I think that's why you find that Ohio State or Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, the big-time schools are looking at these places first and foremost. Obviously, you want to recruit your area. Ohio State wants to lock down the Buckeye State, and they're doing that, both in 2020 and the 2021 class that's in progress. You focus on your area, and then you're cherry picking. And if you have 2 kids that are maybe similar, star rating, and one is doing it in Denver, Colorado, and one is doing it for St. John Bosco, well, which one should you put your time and investment on? Well, you're probably going to look at these schools where what the weight training is like. That they've played good competition. That they're going to not be intimidated by what Mickey Marotti is going to throw at them. And just to, when you're comparing these guys in Texas and the amount of football that they get to play, the amount of development they have, the coaching, where as well as anybody from what you've seen down there growing up, Tim, that they're going to pay for their coaches, and that's one of the most important positions in their high school is the football coach. So you're getting big time people to handle that for you and developing these young people to get them ready for the next step. And that's a big deal for Ohio State, because they don't really have a lot of time for a learning curve. They don't want there's been this big talk about, they don't really want fifth-year seniors around. And even though there have been a lot of valuable ones for Ohio State, they're not planning on anyone they recruit being a fifth-year senior. That's just not the plan. So you need people that are really ready in a hurry, and it's more of an exception when you see, like, he talked about Paris Johnson. That's an Ohio strength training program, but that's going to be way different than what Trey LaRue had in high school, just to pull another name out of a hat. So those guys are going to be on different paths and different tracks. So, sometimes you look at that and you're not going to get everyone from St. Thomas Aquinas or St. John Bosco or these other schools that everyone knows, but generally that's where you're going to want to fall and make if you make mistakes, you're going to live with it if it comes from one of those schools where you trust it.
Yeah, and like Ryan Watts, he's another kid in this class for the safety from Little Elm, Texas. And it's amazing, Boston, if you ever visit Texas. I mean, and I'm not, I grew up here. I spent 11 years here. I spent 11 years in Alabama, 11 years in Texas, and the balance, as I call it, 43 in Ohio. But of course, I've visited back here many times, and it's amazing how many. I mean, Lufkin, my old high school, had an indoor practice facility 20, 25 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, and it's amazing how even small towns, by smallish, I mean, like 3A, 4A, some of these towns around have indoor facilities because they have to kind of keep up with the Joneses, next door.
Yeah.
And like Elijah Gardner, Kemp, Texas, but Kemp, Texas has a really nice football program and nice facilities. I mean, it's halfway between, nowhere and Dallas, if you follow my drift. But it's amazing what they put into it. And Ohio high schools do too, but Ohio high schools don't have spring football, for example, like they do in Texas, where you can come down and also evaluate like they do in Florida. They do in most of the southern states. And that also helps them get a little bit of a head start. But, I don't want to go too crazy on that because clearly it's interesting.
Well, I think it's important.
I think it's important. But you drew the difference between like a Trey LaRue and a Paris Johnson. I mean, that's in the state of Ohio, and Trey LaRue, man, when you look at his measurables, he's what? 6'8", 6'9", 350, 360.
Yeah.
That's a big guy, But really, what kind of shape is he in? And what, he may just be a raw bone Anthony Munoz type and come in and start playing, But
that's the other part that you have to, if you're Ryan Day or Mark Pantoni and you're looking at this, you have to, really dive in and say, it's probably going to take Trey LaRue a little bit of time. Just like last year, you're like, okay, we got room for one more offensive lineman. It can probably be a project. Let's throw our weight behind DeJuan Jones, pun intended there. You can. They don't all have to be 5-star Paris Johnsons who went through this program. Like, if you see something that you like, and I feel like we're picking on Trey LaRue, and I don't mean it that way, but it's the easiest comparison between he and Paris Johnson or Luke Whippler with the program, that he was in there in New Jersey. Like that, it's just different. Some of these guys, the 4 and 5 stars, you're counting on them either being in the 2 deep as soon as they show up, or potentially being a starter in year 2, year 3 at the latest. Nicholas Petit-Frere sort of being that poster boy going into his spring here and the right tackle job. But that's when you're doing this math, it's not as simple as, hey, we're going to take nothing but 4 and 5 star guys, because that's impossible. You can't do that. So you really have to dive into, well, what do you want? How many projects can we take on? And do we think that Trey LaRue or DeJuan Jones can take to our program? If they'd had this 2 years ago when they were in high school, maybe they'd look really different. But now they're going to have that opportunity with Mickey Marotti and Greg Studrawa, and you get to grow from there. But you're not going to have a room that's 100% guys that are going to play from day one. That's just not realistic. Right.
When you look at Trey LaRue, though, what you look at, obviously there's going to be a little bit of work, and like you said, we're not picking on him. I mean, the guy, and I definitely would pick on him if he was standing in front of me and looking down upon me. But
towering
you look at, what they like about him is the guy can move his feet. He seems to have a really good motor, from what I understand. What about him? By that is, it means desire. He has a desire to finish people off, when he blocks, etc.
Yeah.
You sometimes, believe it or not, that cannot be coached, And so then you look at, like you said, you have a little bit of time for some projects. It's interesting because I don't want to segue this too much into this, but, I'm curious about this Ohio State offensive line coming up this year. I mean, you and I both know one of the pearls of the 2019 recruiting class was Harry Miller.
Yep.
And Josh Myers, of course, some people thought he might be angling to leave, but he has opted to return for another season. But, you're curious on what's going to happen, there because Harry Miller, when he got in there, he played extremely well this year from what I understood and from just watching him, and at center I'm talking about. So what do you think is going to happen there? I mean, because I was thinking about that the other night when I was asked by somebody to name some offensive line might be coming on, like Matt Jones and guys like that. But, Harry Miller slipped my mind only because he's a center and Josh Myers is the returning starting center. But they may do some shuffling of the deck. What do you think is going to happen there?
My guess, and this is, I didn't want to get too far ahead of it when Greg Studrawa was talking on Media Day out before the Fiesta Bowl, about what he's going to do for 2020. But the sense that I have is that you have a year of Josh Myers doing it at a really high level that unfortunately not enough people noticed when it came to awards voting. That will not be a problem this year, where he'll go in and he'll be the preseason favorite for the Remington, and I would make a bold prediction right now that he'll win it, because I think that he'll stay at center this year, and we've seen this play out several times when Ohio State and Greg Studrawa had this really rolling, where it's like, okay, you have a veteran center, you know what you're going to get, all the responsibilities, the snapping is good, got the rapport with Justin Fields. I don't think you want to tinker with that. As good as Harry Miller is, he could be Ohio State's starting center. And if Josh Myers is the left, I don't think there would have been any concern about that. But you saw both Pat Elflein and Billy Price really play great at guard before making that move to center. I don't think there's any issue at all whatsoever with Harry Miller playing guard and dealing with that responsibility and learning next to Josh Myers, and then it's his turn. And they'll pass the baton for 2021. I think that's, I'm sitting here right now. I expect that Harry Miller is going to be the starting left guard and replace Jonah Jaxon. To me, I don't think you mess with what's working with Josh Myers there.
Yeah,
you get into the season, but I don't think there'd be any hiccups there. You got a smooth transition. You let the guy do it, and then he might be a first-round pick, and then you pass it off to the next guy, and he might be a first-round pick.
Yeah, but you were talking about a starting offensive line next year. Of Thayer Munford, maybe Harry Miller, Josh Myers, Wyatt Davis, and Nicholas Petit-Frere.
Yeah. I think that's
pretty good.
That's a damn good group, and it should not be overlooked. I told you in November that there was that talk with both Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis that those guys could potentially leave. They had squashed it and were ready to shut that down by the time they got to the Fiesta Bowl. But that, I didn't make that up. Those guys were playing at a level where it was a realistic conversation for both of them that they could try their luck at the next level. Now, the stock for Josh Myers is going to be dramatically different if he wins the Remington and has 2 years of starting experience at center. He's an all Big Ten. He's going to be one of these guys where, it's always hard for me to evaluate the offensive lineman. It's hard for almost everyone who's voting for the awards. Josh Myers had no name recognition last August. Nobody knew who he was, how good he was going to be. But anybody who did watch that Ohio State offensive line knew he was playing at least at one of the highest levels at center in the Big Ten, if not the country, and there was no recognition for that. Well, why is that? Because so many people just base it off the preseason hype, and they never adjust. Same reason that Jeff Okudah didn't win the Thorpe Award. The name recognition, for whatever reason, was not quite the same as it was for LSU. Now, that's an apples to oranges comparison of positions, but when Josh Myers is on every preseason All-America list in July, and it's told to everybody that this is one of the best centers in the country, he's going to be a high draft pick, well, that's going to stick in their mind. So you get to the Remington, voting in November, that's going to be a no-brainer. Everyone will just automatically put him on the ballot. Now, he still has to go out and play really well, and Ohio State will hold him to a high standard also because Harry Miller will be right there pushing him just in case. If they need to make a change, they could do it, but I don't think they will, and I think that's why it was so huge when you're talking about that 5-man unit, Tim, that they got that center and the guard to come back, and Thayer Munford, if he's fully healthy, you've got an experienced, really talented, all those guys touted recruits. You can't ask for a whole lot more if you're Justin Fields.
Yeah, I agree. Master Teague the third, here he comes.
Well, that makes it a lot easier if you have those huge holes. You don't have to worry about making some of those things.
Or Marcus Crowley. I'm thinking Marcus. I'm curious. Like I said, I'm curious to learn more and more about the severity. I mean, whether Marcus Crowley, I don't. From what I'm hearing, he may not be available for the spring, at least in a full-time basis. So there's no need to rush it either. Because running backs. You don't want to put them in jeopardy they don't need to face. Let's put it that way, just to prove a point. But
Tim, are you concerned about the running back position?
No, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Not that I haven't been honest with you, Boston. But dude, I'm looking at this Ohio State offense for next year. I saw the progress that Justin Fields made as a passer as the year went on.
Yeah.
And I just look at the weapons that are going to be at his disposal on the edges, and even at the hybrid back position, even though they don't really call it that anymore. I mean, there's, who knows what the position really is anymore.
Yeah.
But they could play giddy up and augment with the running game again. I mean, they still have to have a power running game presence, which Justin Fields can also help give you. And they can do that with Master Teague the third. But I could see it swing more of number-wise, play-wise, more toward 2018 than it was in 2019 from the standpoint of throwing the ball. Because, you got Garrett Wilson sitting there champing at the bit. and
Chris Olave.
Chris Olave, maybe the best receiver in the country, is just pure make, except for one play, which he'll haunt him the rest of his life. But you know what? He may make some plays this year that'll top those, or stomp that one out, so to speak, cancel it out. But then you see this influx coming of wide receivers, and I don't, like Ryan Day says, you exploit what you've got, right? Yeah. And they've got the potential to be really a real giddy up, over the top passing offense this year. And the curious thing is who's going to be that guy that replaces KJ Hill, that go-to guy on third down. I mean, I'm as curious as you are to see that, but it could be one of these freshmen, and G. Scott is a guy that I'm really curious about, and like I said, Jaxon Smith-Njibga, the kid from down here in Rockwall, Texas. I mean, there's a guy. We all know Julian Fleming and what he's all about. And, I expect him, sometimes it takes them longer than others to convince Coach Brian Hartline they deserve to be on the field in a more substantial way.
Right. Yeah.
But we'll see where that goes, But
you're leaving out your one guy, Tim. Like, you had an opportunity there you're going to miss Jameson Williams here.
Yeah,
he might.
You know what I'm saying, man?
No, I know.
I mean, but that's the thing. You start naming these guys off, and you forget one.
Yeah.
And Jameson Williams. I mean, like I'm saying, they could put together a 4x100 relay team with these guys. they could put together a basketball team with these guys, just fast break basketball that would. I mean, I'm not. That's not hyperbole. That is the truth. I mean, these guys can run. They're athletic. Mookie Cooper. Oh my goodness, what are they going to do with that guy? It's like, the sky's the limit. Even though he's a little guy, I mean, the sky's the limit on the possibilities of what they can do with this guy. They could get the jet sweep going again. Things like this. I mean, there are all these possibilities, and they're ruminating about them as we speak. And so I'm like you. I'm curious. Hey, real quick before we get done here, the other curious thing about this, Ohio State's going to finish probably in that 247 composite ranking, probably fourth, fifth, sixth.
Yep.
In this 2020 class. That sounds about right to you, right?
Yep. I don't know where they are right now. 4 or 5. That's between 1 through 5. I think you're really splitting hairs. It's after that where the drop off really starts following, because I don't know what your question was going to be before I interrupted you there, but I mean, you have to be in that mix with Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, LSU. That's it. Those Oklahoma is going to be in that mix around there a little bit as well, but that's where you have to be. And because somebody actually sent me an email the other day, and they were like, "Whoa, is Ohio State really keeping track? If they finished 6th and they were 14th a year ago?" And I was like, "Well, those numbers matter and they don't matter. You have to look at the per player ranking, especially for the 2019 class, which would have been 3rd. They just couldn't take as many players, and sometimes that's the trick when looking at those class rankings. But yeah, as long as you're there, like there's a difference between signing 25 players and finishing 10th and 25 players and finishing 5th. There's a big gap there, but I don't think the gap is as wide between 1 and 5.
Quality outranks quantity, as you're basically trying to say, and that's that's what we're seeing, I mean, I'm just like, let's face it, there was always going to be a speed bump, whether it was going to be large or small, with the transition from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day. People getting to know Ryan Day, now they know him. Not only is he personable, not only is he intelligent, not only does he look like could be the 3rd Property Brother on HGTV, but the guy can coach his rear end off, and basically took a team that most consider to be maybe the best overall team in the way it took care of business over the season, took them into the playoffs and got beat. Yeah, they got beat by Clemson. Some of it was controversial at the end. It was a lack of execution on a play, that one guy read one thing and one guy read another, and that was the end of the season, Yeah. But the bottom line is he proved a lot of people not wrong. I think he reinforced himself a lot of people. Now, all of a sudden, you look where he's paying dividends is the 2021 class. Dude, they've already got, 10 commitments, I think, to the 2021 class, and they're ranked number 1 by far in that group. And you just look at it, and the interesting thing, the numbers in that class are what are interesting to me too, because 6 of the 10 are from Ohio. So everybody was on Ohio State the last several years for not recruiting Ohio, but now instead of coming back to Ohio to fill some of the gaps, they went the other direction, and they've really gotten after the guys they want from Ohio to begin with, and it's paid dividends.
Yeah, and Berm has written about this a number of times, and it's kind of fascinating. The whole thing with recruiting is such, as I alluded to earlier, it's such a difficult sort of balancing act with, how do you approach that home state? Do you want to go national first, and then, like you alluded to, come back and hope that the Ohio guys haven't moved on to take an offer from Michigan State or the first team that shows them a lot of love, and then they abandon their dreams of playing for the home state Buckeyes? That seemed to be the approach that Urban Meyer was taking towards the latter part of his career at Ohio State, was going national first, but they were then winding up missing on some guys at home. And Ryan Day's kind of flipped that. Get the guys that you really want from Ohio, build the class that way. Like, just going to use Trey LaRue again, since we talked about him so much in this show. You know that guy, if he gets an offer from Ohio State and commits, he's not going anywhere. You got him.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it later. Now you go pursue the national guys that you want. You know that you don't have to worry about filling it in later. Build the baseline and then expand it from there. And it seems to be really working right now.
Yeah. And then, another thing about Trey LaRue is they clearly see a huge, pardon the pun, upside with that guy. There is no doubt about it. I mean, but then you look at the 2021 class, and when you've got Jack Sawyer already committed, maybe he might end up being the best player in the country. Who knows, when it finally comes down to it, and then, you got that offensive tackle from Richfield, Ben Chrisman, you talk about another bookend kind of guy. I mean, 2 guys that could really anchor the lines, which people hear me talk about football all the time. That's what sets the great teams apart. That's where I look first to see if a team's going to be a contender, which is why I was a little bit, the jury was out last year for me on Ohio State from an offensive line standpoint, but I kept hearing the insiders, the guys inside the program saying that line is going to be better than it was the previous year. Turned out to be absolutely correct.
Right.
That was a hell of an offensive line, but when you can stake stink it, and both of those guys are Ohio guys. I mean, that just, kind of puts you in good stead.
And the latest one here is, Michael Hall Jr. He's an in-state guy. He's not a project either. He's a 4-star. I think probably will wind up on the interior of that defensive line and have a big impact down the road. I've been talking about that. The interior of those defensive tackle spots, they had to make a mark. And Ryan Day targets an in-state guy. He also probably would have been, Larry Johnson probably would have been enamored with him no matter what, given his stature and, the 4-star credibility and all that. But he's local. He's a couple hours away. Probably always had that scarlet and gray in his room. Lock him down early. It's February, and he's commit number 10. So that checks a lot of boxes, right? Because it's a high recruit. The star ranking goes up. The class fills out, but now you've already got a good group there at defense tackle, and pretty much everybody else that Berm says would be on Larry Johnson's board, they're scattered around the country. I think you got one in Washington and some in the Southeast. They're all over the country, but you've already built the defensive line group in Ohio. So
exactly.
You know what you have, and then you can go fill in from there.
Yeah, and then getting the tackle from down here in Texas, Donovan Jaxon. All they beat out was a bunch of heavyweights for him: Alabama, Georgia, etc., Texas A&M, right on down the line. It speaks volumes of where the Ohio State recruiting strength is right now. It's about as strong, in my opinion. It is as strong as it's ever been, as I like to say, across the nation and around the world. Enoch Vimahi, the kid from Hawaii, who is, I guess we're hearing was on the Ohio State team this year, played in 3 or 4 games, taking advantage of that redshirt rule that lets you play a little bit. But, he's going to, what we're hearing, he's going to forego his mission, his Mormon mission, and pretty much play out his college football career. Those are just like these little things that just keep popping up. Like I was saying earlier last year before the season started, what sets Ohio State and Alabama and Clemson and some of these other schools apart are these guys who just are rising through the program that you forgot about, or, they've been there for a couple of 3 years, and suddenly now, like I wrote a story about Cameron Brown, he's been there for several years, but now all of a sudden he's going to be competing for one of those cornerback spots. And that's what sets these big time programs apart. They've got this quality that's been bubbling from below.
That's one reason why I didn't talk about Ryan Watts or Legend Cavazos when we were going through the early enrollees. I don't think that the secondary situation is nearly as dire as it's painted, and obviously the big part of that is that Shaun Wade is back. I might be singing a different tune if you didn't have one of the best cornerbacks in America returning for Ohio State, but you and I have both talked a ton about Josh Proctor, so if he's going in there to finally be that starting primary safety, and he's used his experience, some of the good and some of the bad, to take the next step, the athleticism is obviously there. So you have those two guys to start with, and you wrote about Cam Brown. I like his potential. I think he can be a really good cornerback for Ohio State. There's, versatility with Sevyn Banks. He could be right there in the slot. Amir Reep is really, at some point I've had to, change my tune about how this guy could project and what he could do, because a couple of years ago I would have thought, no way is he ever going to start or play significant minutes for Ohio State, but he has developed, and it's not like he was a no-name recruit when Kerry Combs initially landed him. This guy was a 4-star as well. So you have all these 4-stars that have just had to wait behind NFL cornerbacks. I think between that group, you're going to find 2 really good corners who can complement Shaun Wade, and I think they're going to be okay without having to really turn to these guys who haven't had to do it yet, like Watson Cavazos or Tyreek Johnson now heading into his 3rd year with the program. They have options there, and I don't think that it's anywhere near as thin or desperate, or dire as it's been made out.
I agree. Well, not only that, but as I pointed out in that story, a lot of those guys got to play a lot last year. Got to take a lot of steps, and let's face it, when Shaun Wade had his injury problems there late in the year, these guys got to play in key critical situations.
Yes.
And they played, like you said, you saw them play pretty well. You also saw them make some mistakes. That's the way it goes. You roll the dice. Josh Proctor had a couple of plays in that game against Clemson he'd like back. I am sure of that.
Yeah.
But that's the way you learn, and you're not in high school anymore, so to speak. So anyway, hey, I'll be back next week live, I hope, in the at the world headquarters of Lettermen Row as we tackle some new things, some other things, including I want to get more into the off-season program. We'll talk to a couple of experts there about what's going on with the off-season program and how that transforms these players from who you saw walking off the field, let's say in the Michigan game, after the Michigan game, because there's a lot of work that gets done during December. But the guy that'll be walking out to start spring ball, it's funny how these guys go through these transformations, right?
It's pretty wild to look at. They take those before and after pictures when they arrive on campus, and even really every off season they're showing the growth. And you look at the way. I mean, another guy that we've just mentioned, like Josh Proctor, and you look at him, you're like, wow, he looks like he could be a starter right now when he walks on campus. And then you compare it 2 years later, and you're like, oh my God, like they've built a monster. Even these guys who come looking physically ready, like a Paris Johnson, you give Mickey Marotti 8 months or 18 months or 28 months, they're going to do some transformation.
Yeah, Mickey Marotti I remember when I was growing up, Charles Atlas, would have these ads on the back of comic books and stuff. Don't be a peewee, be a tough guy, be a strong guy like Charles Atlas, and I actually ordered one of those kits one time. Didn't do me any good, but I guess you have to actually do the work. You don't just read the book and become, that guy. But yeah, the Mickey Marotti, he ought to be, if he ever decides to retire, he ought to put a lot of that into words because, the funny thing about strength coaching in the college ranks is as much as they have a seminar or two every year, they also like to keep a lot of stuff to themselves, because you're only helping the opposition if you spread the word, so to speak. But yes, so I'm looking forward to talking about that next week. But you know what? We need to break now and get along with life. But until next week, Boston, I really appreciate you joining me again, my man, and helping me in this tough circumstance. But until next week, when we meet again, this is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. We'll see you then.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buck IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.